yesterday. Of course, Canada Soccer made their external investigation results public, and from it, not a whole lot new. Nothing that we really hadn't speculated upon or discerned. There are some understandable changes to reporting of incidents. A new app will be developed for confidentiality should players or any member of the CSA have an issue that they want to blow the whistle on and prevent further issues from arising. But the one sort of certainty that was finally made known is that Bev Priestman, along with a couple of other staffers who were previously suspended, are officially no longer with the Canadian Soccer Association. The cloud, if there is one, that remains hanging over this, and not directly over the Canadian Soccer Association, but of the scandal, is what does the future hold for John Herdman? Because though he was not officially named for privacy reasons, he was one of the redacted names from the report. There are still questions about what his future might hold. And Toronto Sun columnist Steve Simmons, who has been plugged into the Toronto sports scene for years, not going to say stoked the flames much, but he did put out a tweet that suggested there might be more fallout to come here. He said, quoting, "Under the department of what took so long, Bev Priestman is out as head coach of Canada's national women's soccer team. Coming soon, John Herdman and Toronto FC will be parting ways. The drone scandal from Paris has deep roots." So that is, I'm assuming, Gareth Wheeler, not just an unfounded rumor from Steve Simmons, because he's not that kind of journalist. He has been having conversations like we all have been. So he seems to think that Herdman is out. We do not know for a fact that that will happen. I'm curious, as someone who's covered Toronto FC for many years, as you have, what you think the future holds for John Herdman. Can he keep his job? Should he keep his job? What might the Reds look like next season?
There's a lot at play here. I like Steve. I've known him for a good time, but I have no indication that John Herdman leaving Toronto FC is imminent or anything of the case. I mean, it's business as usual as far as I've been told. The coaching staff and the people around him were all at the training ground yesterday, all kind of wrapping up the season that was and looking ahead to 2025, as were the business types, as was everyone. Again, it's business as usual. But that's not to say that Toronto FC may be eyeing someone else in that position sometime in the future. And that goes beyond the drone scandal. I'll say this, the report yesterday, I'll say this once again, it was a nothing burger. Two things came out of this. Bev Priestman and two staff members are leaving. They are officially gone. And a bunch of new HR policies. And I don't know about you, but when I get an HR policy update in my mailbox, I flush that. It's like, yeah, be a good person, do the right thing. I understand it. There was nothing that added to what we don't already know or what already hasn't been reported on when it comes to John Herdman. I mean, behind the scenes, a lot of fingers and all roads kind of point to John Herdman, but a lot of this stuff is anecdotal. There isn't hard evidence, nor is there people that are willing to come out and speak out against him. That's why a lot of these reports that have come out pointing the finger at John Herdman are done anonymously. This report required people to come out and put their name on something. And I don't see a long list of individuals that will want to be putting their name on something that's kind of, pointing the finger at John Herdman. I just don't see it. It's not going to be Bev Priestman. Those two have been tight for decades now. And I can't see her taking that angle in terms of bringing things forward. Joey Lombardi and John Herdman are exceptionally tight and have been, and Lombardi simply isn't going to speak out against them. The players aren't going to speak out against them because they don't want to implicate or put themselves in the middle of this situation. So if no one's going to come out and put their name on it, then where is all the hard evidence against John Herdman? And if you're going to, if you're people within Canada Soccer, for example, and I know that there are people that want to make sure that John Herdman, punished might be the wrong word, but plays his part or accepts responsibility for the blame that he has in this scenario. There's people that absolutely are out and want that kind of justice for John Herdman here, but what can you prove that, in a court of law, when a sort of dispute like this comes to the table, what can you actually prove here? It's a tough one. Do they have enough on him? Certainly, again, he wasn't the one that got busted here. So that's going to be a really tough one. And if you're Toronto FC, I mean, I think his job is tenuous even outside of the drone scandal. There's new ownership, new leadership. New power structure built within Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment and Toronto FC. And John Herdman's coming off a substandard season, a season where there was a lot of questions about the direction of the team. So his future would be in question no matter what. It's just not something in the long list of things that Toronto FC has to do. I just don't think it's at the front of the queue right now, unless something has changed over the last week or 7 days. If we're looking for that to have come with this report, I think that you'd be really disappointed in that. This did nothing more to assign more blame or a different kind of blame on John Herdman than anything that was reported previously.
Jordan, what I find incredibly fascinating about these types of stories, but in particular with this one, is where John Herdman's stock had been prior to the news or the reports of everything that transpired in France this year. I don't want to speak for your experience. I know I saw him at the final. I know he wasn't on the pitch with Jay after he won, and I can understand that that's just a father letting his son have the moment, though Jay was on the pitch after the match with other family members. John was keeping an exceptionally low profile, didn't want to sort of take the spotlight away from his boy. But it's interesting to think that in a world where this isn't the case of what's going on, I know Canada Soccer the day before the game put out that they were going to announce the findings. Maybe that convinced them to maybe take even more of a low profile. All of this is to say John Herdman 12 months ago would be on the pitch shaking hands and kissing babies. He was that level of famous within this Canadian soccer landscape. He took a couple of lumps with the Croatia comments at the World Cup, but even then, when he left the post as men's national team head coach, he had a sterling reputation. I'm fascinated to know what you think of how his stock has fallen, has plummeted with everything that's gone on and the decisions that he's made in the past.
I guess what's the biggest thing that I think about when I think about John Herdman is what was his biggest X factor maybe a year and a half ago, or what he did with the women's team and the men's team. I think people would say he's a motivator of people, right? He would get the most out of a group. Like for me, John Herdman never screamed like a tactician or someone who would try to reinvent the game and come with these brand new ideas. He is a guy that would motivate other people. I think what's happened, the F Croatia comment, that wasn't smart if you're looking at a hindsight, but that wasn't big to me. I think a bigger comment or a bigger situation is complaining about more goals against a League One team. Like situations like that, you're starting to see his character and seeing decisions that he made that just weren't the best. I think that's what's probably tainting his legacy a little bit. And I think with what's going on right now, I don't think that he's getting fired off of this Jones scandal. Personally, I just don't think there's enough information. Wheels already touched on it and people coming out with him. But I think when you're the coach of TSC, a club that spends so much money and people want to turn that around, there has to be some sort of results. And I do think that team is highly imbalanced. But at the end of the day, you're a manager that has come there to try to turn things around. I think going into this 2025 season, he might get another crack at it. But you're getting another crack at a job on thin ice. I think MLSC already has someone else lined up in terms of if he's coming in at the start of the season, or if they're going to give him a little bit of a runway and see how that works. But John Herdman knows this as well, that he's on thin ice. So when it comes to his legacy, I think he's just looking at someone who you saw the best of him. And I think now maybe at the last few months, we've seen the low lights of him as well.
Yeah, I think his legacy is cemented. That's not going to change. He oversaw a period of time with the women's national team that brought about unparalleled popularity and success on the field, and then transitioned to a men's national team and brought belief to a program and helped them qualify for their first World Cup since 1986. Like none of that is going to change. That is etched in stone, and he deserves a lot of that acclaim. Quite clearly, so do the players and the other individuals involved in that. With that being said, it's the relationship element that is forever being changed. He's a cult of personality, and inside his circle, people are still fiercely loyal and believe in everything he preaches. A lot of people in the public see him in the very same way. He's a very likable individual. You believe in what he has to say. But there are fractured relationships because of all this and because of the way that he's approached certain situations. So I think that it's a bigger question is where do things go from here for John Herdman? His past, that's fine. That will forever be. But the future, I think there's a lot more clouds or shadows of doubt on that.
All right, we will segue easily from this chat into the men's national team. And of course, the man that replaced John Herdman was Jesse Marsh. And we're not going to say unparalleled success, just like Herdman had with the women's national team, but certainly, Gareth, it's been a marvelous start for this program. They are back in action, of course, on Friday on the road in Suriname, a match in the Nations League that you can watch right here on One Soccer. And as we spoke of on Monday, and will continue to do so, the big news out of camp, no Alphonso Davies, no Derek Cornelius in the team. And we sort of outlined again on Monday and yesterday about maybe the reasons why. Should it be surprising? The answer was a very resounding no. So let's ask this question then, Jordan Wilson. In the respective absences, half the back line, who stands to benefit in this audition in front of Jesse Marsh?
I'd say obviously it has to be Larea. If you look at a situation where he's definitely going to have to do a shift as well. Adekube potentially could have a big role. And then for me, the biggest one, maybe this is a time where you really pick Jesse Marsh's brain and see who he trusts, who he believes in. Because it's Joel Waterman starting or it's Kamal Miller. And you saw Cornelius with that left foot play on that left side next to Moise Bombito, and everyone knows that it works. But Kamal Miller has been the guy in World Cup qualifying. And for me, a mainstay at the World Cup. And it seems as if when Jesse Marsh came into that leadership role and running this team, that Kamal Miller hasn't really been getting that burn or hasn't earned that trust of Jesse Marsh. But this would have to be that time, a quarterfinal game against Suriname, a two-leg affair. Kamal Miller, again, I'm not there at training, but it's one of the two. And I think that's very telling of how things should be. You understand, I think if you're Kamal or you're Joel, you understand that Cornelius is playing over you when he's healthy. But he's not there this time. So who's the number two? Who's 1B? That is a question that needs to be answered. Personally, I think with Kamal, I know this system is playing center back and dabbling it in my life. It is very insecure because you're 1v1 a lot in isolated pockets. But Moise Bombito and Derek Cornelius make that look easy. So for Kamal Miller or Joel Waterman stepping into that spot, you have to say, look, I know that this is a bit different than how you normally play in terms of having cover. But you have to say, look, this is the system, and I'm riding with it because I want to get my playing time too. So I hope whoever plays, they step into that role effortlessly.
Really quickly, Adam, I just don't think there's much to gain for any of these players that are stepping in because these rules are spoken for, but there's a lot to lose. You're supposed to beat Suriname, and convincingly so. Like, we're well beyond where we were during World Cup qualifying a few years ago. Like, there's nothing to learn from a game like this. Just because you play well against Suriname doesn't mean that you're going to be ready to play X, Y, or Z team when it comes to the World Cups. So this is just about getting the job done and being a little bit pragmatic here over the next two games.
But I think anytime you play quickly, anytime you play, though, that's a way to show your manager that you're ready to fill a role. You know you're 11, but you have to be knocking on the door. If you look at it like, oh, this is just a match where we have to just get things done and move on, you have to say, yo, you could use me when you need me. Jesse, I'm here. This has to be a match for that, too.
Well, Gareth, I want to pick up on the pragmatic tone in which you speak. I'm assuming that's your personal vibe into how Jesse Marsh should approach this tie with Suriname, because you're right, there's not a whole lot to gain. You're expected to win, and ideally you want to come out scot-free injury-wise, get your result, and then focus on the semis. Yeah.
Again, this is an awkward window. You have a number of MLS players that haven't played for quite some time. Players are quote-unquote exhausted right now. Like, they're tired. It's a busy part of their season. That's why these three windows in 3 consecutive months never makes a whole lot of sense for me. Difficult trip down to Suriname. We'll see what the pitch conditions are like at BMO Field. It's just about win and move on. And I hear what you're saying, Jordan. Every time you put on a jersey, you want to represent yourself and your country well. But again, this isn't a top team that you're playing against here. A lot of the times you're going to be judged based on how you play against the United States or Mexico, not Suriname here. So it's just a different context for me.
Personnel-wise then, Gareth, with that in mind, I think we know who the starting 11 would be in a I've got John Herdman on the brain, so I'm going to say tier 1 opponent. But in this one, is there anything you want to see experimented with, or that sort of personnel decisions that might be keeping Jesse Marsh and his staff not necessarily up at night, but pondering?
I do. The big picture change for me that I wonder whether Canada can play this way as they enter the 2026 World Cup is playing two strikers up top. I think that you need to make sure that you know what you look like if you drop a player a little bit deeper in the midfield. Laren and Jonathan David are both versatile. They like to drop deep in different areas, but they're not out and out midfield players. And sometimes you might need a little bit of a different approach. And especially in terms of their build-up play, I think they need a little bit more in the midfield as well. That's why with Ismail Kone back in the team, perhaps he could play a more advanced midfield role, and you sacrifice maybe a Kyle Laren in the starting 11 to see what that looks like. That's what I would experiment with a little bit here, especially in this first leg. Then come back home and you can play your preferred 4-4-2 formation.
It's time to get to our Tony Bet topics.
Ooh.
Presented by tonybet. These are the top picks for today with a look to CONCACAF Nations League coming up. The quarterfinals, which means there's 8. We'll see how many we get through. I'd be happy with 2. Let's start with Suriname hosting Canada. The Surinamese, Jordan Wilson, plus 380 to defeat Canada, who are the heavy favorites at minus 173.
I'm going to say Canada, but I will say that Suriname is no slouch. I think in a team in CONCACAF who has brought in some big dogs from the Netherlands as well. Like, they'll give Canada a game, but I can't bet against Canada. That's unpatriotic of me. No chance.
Geraldo Becker, good player. Yeah, there's some good players in the Suriname side. I'm just looking for a nice, tidy, low-scoring win for Canada. Give me a 1-0 away fixture. I think the best bet, I don't want to touch minus 173, but give me the under in this one. This game screams under 2.5 for me.
All right, Gareth Wheeler. I assume the match is being played in Kingston. Jamaica hosting the U.S. plus 265, and the U.S. only minus 105.
Steve McLaren's first game in charge, by the way.
At home.
Jamaica's called in some good players, too. It's like a pretty decent squad. They continue to recruit really well. Give me Jamaica on the draw no bet here at plus 160. We're still in the early days of Mopo. Draw no bet plus 160 on tonybet seems the best play for me.
Jamaica 1-0 win. I don't even need to ask you.
1-0 win, Jamaica. Remember I said it. Remember the date. 1-0 win.
Come back on Monday. Also, come back tomorrow for more One Soccer Today. We'll continue to look towards the Nations League.